What a ride, right? What a ride. So I want to take this time to say thank you very much. I cannot believe we're actually here. To the founders of the Futures Project, thank you very much. Stacey's not working, of course. Kelsey, Sable, Carrie, thank you for this opportunity. It's been unbelievable, and we are stoked that we were actually chosen to work on the Climate United project. I want to introduce my esteemed colleagues. We have Katie Johnson, Amelia Aversen, Kaelib Teegarden, and Bonie Shupe. And we had the fortune of working for the Climate United capstone project. So Climate United was founded in 2021. It is a branch of the American Alpine Club, and it was founded to elevate marginalized voices in the climate community. They do a lot of great work. Most notably, actually, it launched with the Route Name Task Force and the Principles and Guidelines. And they also have a very large database to promote LGBTQ and BIPOC climate guides and photographers for hire to promote. They also have an affiliate support network, which is what we're going to be focusing on. So when we started this project, they had 4 affinity groups. They since added one, Escala out of DC, which is their 5th, and they'll soon to be looking to add a lot more. But those 4 affinity groups are Cruxing in Color, Queer Climate Collective, Color the Wasatch, and Salt Lake Area Queer Climbers. Salt Lake Area Queer Climbers. What once was traditionally, or with no malcontent, a very exclusive space in the climate world, and sometimes unsafe spaces, these affinity groups created a community. One thing that we learned throughout our interview process and learning more about these groups is that they wanted a space, they wanted a voice, and there wasn't one, so they created it. And through this presentation, we're going to show why these safe spaces and why these communities are so important to protect, promote, and provide resources for. Sorry about that. The opportunity that we saw with Climate United is pretty simple. Affinity groups are individually doing amazing work, but collectively they could be doing a lot better. And there was a gap in information sharing. That was the big miss, and the big task that we were trying to solve is how to increase information sharing amongst the affinity groups. Another ask was around data gathering to support future strategies, and another one was what's a framework they can use for the future as they scale and grow several more affinity groups into the program. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Katie Johnson to talk about some of that research.
Thank you, Josh. So after the needs and opportunities were identified from the information that we were given, we entered the research phase. So the first phase of that was our interview phase. We used the background knowledge that we were given from American Alpine Club and Climate United to create a list of questions to conduct individual interviews with all of the affinity groups. This helped us determine what they were doing well and what they were already succeeding in terms of different areas, and then also what they could use more support in moving forward. It was inspiring to find the commonality between the groups. They all, like Josh mentioned, created the space that didn't exist prior to these organizations in their different regions, and it should have existed long ago. So it was really neat to see that commonality kind of woven in between those 4 groups. And while they all have their own set of mission and values, they're all working towards that shared common goal. We did identify some of the areas that the groups are doing really well, whether that's planning events or fostering community involvement. Some groups are already exceeding in those areas, but we also identified a few areas that we could support them moving forward with our proposal. Some of that is gaining a better understanding of their financials and that relationship between American Alpine Club and each individual group. Some of that is understanding marketing do's and don'ts or current social media trends, different things like that. So they all have their different strengths, all things they want to work on. So we just identified all of those things to help us create our solution. In addition to the interviews we conducted, we also reviewed a few different pieces of data and research to support our work. So we looked a little bit into why affinity groups can be successful and why people join them in the first place. And a lot of that is to create that sense of community and sense of belonging, which is very similar to what we found within the Climb United network. And they also are able to provide tools and resources for individuals to help them thrive in their individual spaces. Unfortunately, they're not all 100% successful. They all have their own set of challenges. That includes lack of budget, lack of resource, lack of engagement, lack of shared vision. So it's important to identify those as well. We also looked at a City of Portland Affinity Group member satisfaction survey and found that 74% of their members joined their affinity group because they wanted that sense of belonging with similar people in that similar affinity. So just identifying that that's a huge reason that people are joining these groups to begin with. They're also looking to increase awareness around these affinities, and they're looking to network with stakeholders externally with that similar affinity as well. So our research and external case study data helped us formulate a solution to increase and support the affinity group successes and also help them address and resolve and eliminate some of the challenges that they're facing.
So Katie went over some of the empirical evidence why creating a toolkit like this, which we're going to get into, but we would be remiss to mention some of the personal and professional experience that we bring to this project. So one of those experiences is mine. In 2019, I started the Plastic Impact Alliance with 3 of my colleagues, and we essentially wanted to bring brands in the outdoor industry together to eliminate plastic waste at trade shows like Outdoor Retailer, also Grassroots. And 2 years into that project, essentially we created a Google Drive where we could share information, contact information, resources like sourcing plastic alternatives. And so 2 years later, a survey of members revealed that they had in fact used that toolkit to make a difference. Nearly 50% had someone on staff dedicated to sustainability. 36% had removed plastic envelopes, bubble wrap, and poly bags. More than 80% had eliminated single-use plastics at trade shows and events, which is huge. And more than 75% wanted to continue using that toolkit to receive new ideas and share their ideas within the network. I'll pass it off to Kaelib for now.
So on to our proposed solution. After concluding the interviews and reviewing our research, we decided that we wanted to create a system for the affinity groups to communicate and resource share with one another. So to do so, we created the following framework. As you can see in our framework proposal, there are 4 distinct pillars. We're going to detail all 4 of these pillars later on in the presentation, but we're going to begin with the toolkit. And the toolkit is a distinct space where the affinity groups can exchange resources, about grant writing, events, and so much more. For the detailed toolkit, I'll hand it over to Bonie.
Okay, so when we started our toolkit, we talked to Climb United, and we decided that, again, Google Drive was like the best place for us to start compiling all of this information for them. And we divided it up into these different sections, starting with an onboarding package, events, resource, education, lunch and learns, contacts and resources, and logos and marketing. And we created this toolkit and started to just like really fill in all the information that they needed there. For the onboarding package, we felt like this was a really important part of the toolkit because a lot of the affiliate partners really didn't understand like what resources they were gaining from becoming a member of Climb United. The onboarding package will include, like, first we have a communication channel that they'll become a part of, and then we have a frequently asked questions section, which will go over like how funding is collected and used, as well as any other questions that the group has.
So the next portion of our toolkit is the grant resources portion. In the idea for grant resources section came from a need that was highlighted by the affinity groups during our interview process. So to respond to this need, we created this section, which is truly a one-stop shop for the first-time grant writer, and it sets them up for success before they begin moving on with their first application. So in this section of the toolkit, we have summarized the largest and most useful grant databases. We've outlined the process of grant prospecting and writing from start to finish. We've aggregated common grant applications and reports, and we've tailored that to match the distinct geographic locations of affinity partners. We've overviewed typically requested financial and legal documents that most grants require, and we've provided resources for continued learning. It was important to us and Climb United that these tools remain living, quote unquote. As more and more affinity groups join the network, they will be able to collaborate on and find what works and what doesn't for them so that they can improve their processes over time, while simultaneously improving the interconnection of the network.
So one of the main focuses for our project was providing a very practical deliverable. Like, we wanted to come up with something that they can use now. And so with that, the toolkit was created, and one of the big asks around data gathering. And kind of a low-hanging fruit, but the best way for data gathering amongst several groups was we felt was an event feedback form. Every group has programming, every group does fundraising, but they don't share best practices or anything with each other. So simple event feedback form lives in the Google Drive that we are giving the keys over to Climb United to access, to own, to compile the data and spread back out. The purpose is, can be pretty obvious for an event feedback form, but one of the big ones is reflecting and celebrating all the work that they've done from 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. They can say, hey, we did 100 and so events, we brought in 500 new members, we raised $20,000, we were able to get out and go climbing, we funded this, X, Y, So huge reflect and celebrate moment that they're actually able to have data to support, but they're also able to inform future strategy. So they can find out what didn't work, what really worked for some of area career climbers, could that work for Career Climbing Collective? There is no format for that right now. And this is something that, while it's a little bit low-hanging fruit, like I said, it's something that we developed. Shara and Climb United was stoked on, that they're like, yeah, this is not just like practical right now, but it's also providing us with so many more ideas that we can run with it now. So it's kind of like the start and the spark of something that we're hoping to really be able to pass off to Climb United in the future. Literally, they can go soon. So, but some of the questions were pretty similar to what you think, but location, event, describe, community partners involved, team members added, worked with data opportunities. All of that can be, there's some drop-down options, so all of it can be sorted in Google Drive, combined, and then again, sent out for future strategy. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to the communication portion with Katie.
Thank you again. So the second pillar that we were looking to identify was combining their communication strategies into one online shared channel so that they could stay connected on a more informal basis. In addition to the toolkit where they're sharing documents and resources and links and all of those things, we wanted to have a space where they could just informally chat, ask questions about each other, to each other, what's worked, what didn't, kind of in correlation to everything we've talked about so far. So within this channel, they'll be able to share fundraising opportunities and best practices, talk about current social media trends, things like that, and then also higher level things like event planning and fostering more community support. Because we're hosting the toolkit on Google Drive, we thought that Google Chat space was the best option for this. They can, of course, use another chat channel if that is more cohesive with their group. Google Chat has been upgraded significantly since the early 2000s, from my personal experience. So we were thrilled to see all of the things that you can do with this feature. This is just a snapshot of what the space could look like. It will be hosted and moderated by the American Alpine Club and Climb United organizers and individuals, but they're able to more informally share and chat amongst each other with all the things that they are looking to do. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Amelia.
The slide you've seen 3 times now, so I'll move on quick. So again, we just want to reiterate, these groups are already doing amazing work on their individual platforms, but there's also this incredible opportunity to learn from one another in this workshop setting. So in our meeting with Shara at Climb United, she said the word panels, and our minds immediately went to lunch and learns to create this structure, this learning training structure, especially because these groups are spread across the US. So the gist is that we connect the network with outside experts, but also harness and empower the group's collective knowledge. What we learn from each group is that they're at very different stages of growth. Some have been doing this for years, while others are brand new, they just got started. Some have a leadership structure that's robust, while other founders are doing this on their own, on their weekends, out of their living room. So the groups helped us really inform which training topics would be most relevant to them. And those include, like Kaelib talked about, how to apply for grants, the fiduciary-beneficiary relationship with the AAC, marketing basics and strategy, ins and outs of hosting in-person events. Liability insurance was a big one we didn't even realize, but there were a lot of questions around that. How to land brand sponsorships, how to work with climbing gyms, and then finally different pathways for growth. So we foresee these sessions being live on Zoom or another video platform and recorded so groups can join the conversation, but also have access to the talks for future reference and as a resource to train new leaders. We also created a timeline, January through December of next year, and this is proposed kind of depending on their cadence, what they need, when they can meet. And so we kind of plugged in those different topics that we went through, and then we also paired speakers with those topics who are on call and ready to talk about marketing basics, applying for grants, and then the onboarding intro. And those will all live in the toolkit as a document and can be added to, but really we're providing them with like our network and the people we already know who want to provide and share with them. And then the fourth time I see this slide.
It's the final time as well. So in-person meetups. To be sure, affinity groups are excited to connect with one another online. However, there's also an intense interest in gathering the entire network at an in-person meetup. Unfortunately, at this time, there just isn't capacity within Climb United to plan, organize, and host events like this. However, the goal and intention behind this toolkit and our proposal has always been to increase the overall operating capacity and interconnectivity of the affiliate support network. So over time, as affinity groups become more familiar with the toolkit and with one another, we can have heart that these groups will come together and celebrate not only the uniqueness of each individual group, but also the success of the growing network and the special relationships that may come from it, and especially from in-person groups.
So we are turning the keys over to the toolkit to Climb United today, or tomorrow, or Friday, depending on our schedules. In it, they'll have access to documents like event feedback forms and the grant resources, contacts for each other and panelists, and marketing materials about corporate sponsorships and more to continue growing and fostering a safe space for diversity and inclusivity in the outdoor industry. So Climb United is already doing really important work to grow the outdoor industry and beyond, but extra time to make a toolkit like this is a luxury. So that's where we're honored to have stepped in and helped them create this super practical tool that they can use tomorrow or Thursday or Friday. We really wanted to create something practical and deliverable that can be used as soon as possible. We believe that their interconnectedness will only make them stronger and louder. This platform will get them started so that they can continue building skills, building leaders, and building the industry. When we shared our final draft with Shara, she said she had already thought of even more ideas, and that's the point of this, just to keep iterating and adding and using something really simple like Google Drive to put everything that they already know in one place. I think organization was the biggest thing. So we look forward to seeing and supporting their success for months, maybe a year to come. With that, we're ready for questions.
Awesome job. I love a toolkit. Yeah. So because there's all these different organizations, like were you able to identify a North Star? Like how do you measure success once the toolkit's implemented?
Yeah, that's a really good question. After talking with the community group, success is really about that creating community, so it is hard to measure. What we were hoping to gather with the toolkit is giving them some measurables. Some data points, whether that's the number of that something that they can actually hang their hat on to how we have that impact. Because they are at various stages organizationally. So some just celebrate, by meetups on a weekly basis, and some are getting out there, once we get hiring guides. So they're all different stages, but North Star is really just that community and growing that community and elevating that voice. Yes, of course you can.
Also, in our conversation with Climb United, it became clear that even with 5 groups right now, they have so much they're already working on. And so I think the measurement of success is going to be that they continue to add groups and that they don't get tired of adding groups and that we don't hear that Climb United is no longer a thing, that they sustain and that they last more than just the year that they've already been doing this. So I think that's a really simple one, but by adding more organizations, that can become really exhausting, and this will help them kind of take off some of the load.
Another sign of success would be fair treatment across all the organizations. One of the things that we pulled out in the interview was that everyone had a gym that they would go to, right, with their group, but sometimes some of the gyms only gave them a handful of passes, whereas other ones had a formal contract. And so in our toolkit, those things were addressed, and we put in those resources. So everyone kind of knows, if you're a new group out of wherever, they can look at these climbing gym contracts, thank you, and really get the same treatment across the board to really help grow their network. That was one of the things.
Get in the screen, yeah.
Yeah. So the beauty of this toolkit is how dynamic it is, how it can continue to grow and adapt with their future needs. Is there someone from Climb United or maybe the different affinity groups that would be the point person to manage this and ensure that it stays relevant, and organized, and useful?
Yes, our main contact, Shara, will be the owner. She's the manager of this program. She's also manager of Parks and Color, which is an affinity group. So she has a very large vested interest in the success.
She's already started adding to the toolkit. We haven't
What other questions?
Okay, we have a question from Carly, one of our virtual judges. Are there checkbacks with the affiliates on what their current needs are? Is that the responsibility of Climb United? Do they have the resources for this? And she specified needs being current gaps or struggles. And I assume that she means moving forward, because obviously the interview process was very much investigating that.
I was just gonna, so I'll say some words and I'll pass it off. There's some various thoughts here. But I think what we ideated on was that the affinity groups themselves can share best practices and have accountability with each other. So they're great, we have a marketing plan for the next 24 months. Now here's our biggest need. And the other group can be oh, that's great because we flipped. We actually had that issue last year. So I think they can kind of help each other out a little bit more grassroots wise, you know, once there's like an organization already in place.
I was just gonna add more. We also did our own interviews kind of with those questions. And so we plan to provide the notes from those interviews to Shara and Eddie at Climb United. And so hopefully they can use that as a starting point, and also we'll include the questions we asked too. So I think the biggest thing with this was that we weren't determining their calendar because we don't know what their availability is. And so, yeah, hopefully they'll be able to use the tools that we have at their pacing.
I think for me personally, my hope is that they'll use the chat space for a lot of that, like Josh said, the shared accountability. I think having those open conversations and keeping that channel live, they can address future needs that they'll have up front with the group and kind of utilize that resource. I think that was like one of the initial reasons that we created that chat channel, was to keep that open and keep that live.
Yeah, to belabor this question quickly. So
It's great.
I think the beauty of specifically the chat channel, I gotta move over.
Bonnie's going the other way.
Specifically is, so this is an affiliate support network. However, before there's like a formal system of communication, affiliate groups are not connecting with one another. So if you think about all the affiliate groups as nodes or points, they're all going to Climb United, but if they don't have a system to communicate with one another, then there's no network. The web isn't complete. It's just a peer. So with the chat channel specifically, a lot of very simple questions that are just information gaps because of people's various backgrounds can be answered. For example, when I was talking about Cruxing in Color, they had a question early on. They got an attorney to pro bono help them apply for 501c3 status, but they weren't sure if that was the right decision because who would you ask if you don't know anyone? So you can talk to other affiliate groups about their experiences with that you're truly, you're a part of the network and you can support one another with questions that you come across throughout your stages of development. And then eventually, as that knowledge floor is raised, they can bring more and more groups in. It becomes easier and easier to support those groups because the raised support.
Awesome. One more. Thank you. From David, our other virtual judge. I'm curious how the contact list slash resources will be kept up to date as well as kept engaged in the organization.
So I think with the resources in the toolkit, we are handing over ownership to Shara. But I will say that we all kind of recognize that this, the information sharing is going to exist amongst the affiliate network or the affiliate network, but it's also going to have a much greater level of success if there's brand buy-in. So it will need like frequent updating, but I expect that to update with questions from the affinity groups themselves. When they say, like, hey, I saw that you did an event with TNF or got sponsorship, or with Arc'teryx, like who's the contact person there? I think it will be a natural flow of information and asking for hey, who do I go to for this? One of the big questions that was like an aha moment for me when I was going through my interview, just a personal experience, was someone said, you don't know what you don't know. And I thought that was true that really struck home as like somebody, on the brand side that really wants to help, but it's so easy to just like write a check and move on, like, hey, I stand for inclusivity, I want to support this. But you don't know how, is that check? Yeah, of course they're going to cash it, it's going to be fine, but there could be so much of a better opportunity to help out. And with this, I think it'll be a living, breathing document that can be changed and adjusted.
I think also in the short term, a lot of us have indicated that we're willing to stay on officially to support this initiative. So I know that we personally have had to share additional contacts and resources if they have a lunch and learn session that we didn't propose, that they're looking for connections. So kind of in the short term, being able to kick that off for them so that they can get to a place where they're then adding it to themselves down the line.
More of a comment. I think I appreciate, because you only have X amount of time to put this together, 3 months, right? That your solution was very tangible and very not simple. I know you put a lot of work into it and a lot of effort.
We agree.
Yeah.
But it's very
I like
practical.
that, yeah.
But your comment on being practical, I think that's necessary for where Climb United is in order to continue to move forward, where if you gave them maybe too much because of their bandwidth, right? I think it's a challenge with all things. But since this is kind of on the side for a lot of them, so I appreciate that it's tangible and very practical, like you said. So great job.
We definitely wanted to be, we struggled with like the thought experiment portion of it. And now we can actually like hand something off, which just feels super more.
Yeah.
What ideas or I guess, ideas did you have through this that maybe didn't make the deck because it was, hey, this is too much for either us or them to bite off?
Okay. So I think it sparks, again, like, it depends where you're at personally. Coming, as a regional manager for Arc'teryx, I was like, holy shit, like I can do a lot with this. But one of the big ones is liability insurance and spending a lot of money to hire climbing guides to take groups out into the field, into cracks. Whereas long term, it'd be way more economical to have guides already in the group who just volunteer their time. So it'd be like funding those programs, just brought up a lot of like mentorship program ideas that just not practical in 3 months, but it sparked a lot of ideas that were like, hey, there's a lot to be said, once you start like digging in a little bit more.
So I think the tricky thing here is that the toolkit can almost be infinite. There are so many possibilities of best practices to share with one another. In the conversation with Crux and Color, there were two that I identified that I wish that we put in the toolkit, but we only have so much time. The first is a volunteer guide. So Cruxing and Color, they only have 2 employees on staff, and they rely heavily on volunteers in order to run their events. So bringing on, or putting together a volunteer guide in a toolkit would enable volunteers to more easily train other volunteers. So that's one. The other one that they identified that I thought would be like an awesome addition is the de-escalation training briefer guide. Because these groups bring together so many people with different backgrounds, different, sometimes conflicting identities, there can sometimes at climbing events be issues raised, or to be frank, like fights. So de-escalation training specifically for volunteers so they're equipped with the knowledge and comfort to handle those situations when they arise is something that would be incredible to include, but we don't have the training for that. We have limited time, so we could really, the toolkit can be built out forever. And hopefully the organizations take that on and add to it.
Cool.
And then obviously the event, we did, we didn't go in and try. We actually did try to plan an event. We did we did start tapping some of our resources to think about an annual event for them. But in the end, we felt like it was a little too overwhelming for them to take on right now. And I just know, like, as someone who worked as a consultant for a really long time, I really just wanted to give them a deliverable that they could use. And so we kept it simple, and we feel like really, like, Shara was so excited, and we felt like it was good.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Good job.
Okay, we're gonna take 10, and then the Futurist Project group is up. Woo! At 4:30.
Good job.